very great pleasure to introduce Allison, Allison Turkos, who, do you want to come on up? I've abandoned the stage today. Had enough of the stage, but you can go up there. Um, Allison, I always think it's better that people introduce themselves because I'm going to end up saying something and be like, no, I don't want you to talk about that. I wanted you to talk about this. But this is part of my silence breaker journey that I get to meet these amazing, strong, fearless women, and none stronger and more fearless than Allison, who's taken on major corporations, criminal justice system, just about everybody that has a pulse. She's taken them on. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, folks. I'm feeling very emotional because one, that song really touched me, and two, I was going through the cards that Lauren had made, and I had to stop myself 3 into them because I started to cry because they are so incredible, and I passed them back to Lauren. I was like, I can't do this. I was like, I have to get on stage, and I'm going to start to cry. My name is Allison Turkos. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm so grateful to be in this room with you all and to share a space with you. I'm going to walk around because that helps me to just sort of feel myself and get into the space. My background is in community organizing, and so oftentimes I like to sort of just set some ground rules and some community agreements for us all, if that's okay with you. So one of the first things that I really want to do and to say is that the things that we're talking about are really intense and they're really heavy. And so we're going to be sharing some time together, and some of the things that I'm going to be talking about and that we're talking about at this conference are also really complex and heavy. The number one thing to do is to invest in yourself. If at any point in time you're feeling triggered, if at any point in time you need to get up and leave the room or to move your body around, you don't owe me anything. I also might swear a little bit, so that's okay. I was going to say, you don't owe me shit. So if you need to get up and leave, those doors are there. If you need to get up and move your body, if that's what's going to make you feel good, invest in yourself, because that is the most important thing. If you see someone else who gets up and leaves, the number one thing that you should think is that we're feeling proud of them. You should feel proud of that person because they're investing in themselves, and they need to do that to heal. They're not being rude. Nope. Leave that. Get that out. So I just sort of want to set that ground rule. Because I think sometimes when we're talking about our stories or we're sharing our stories, it can be intense as fuck. And that's something that I just sort of want to not let go of, but just sort of set that community agreement. Also, just the idea of one of the things that I learned pretty early in my life is that there's no such thing as a safe space. You can make safer and supportive spaces, and that R and safer is really important. So I think that we shout out to Lou for, and every person who has really made this space safer and supportive. And I'm going to try to do my best here and to hold that space collectively. But sadly, I think so many of us have experienced firsthand that no space is safe. And I have learned that very sadly. And I think a lot of us in this room have also learned that. I feel like I'm doing a stand-up show. And so I'm obviously using my computer. In case you can't tell, I'm a very progressive person. My real job. I work in abortion rights. So in case you can't tell, that's where my computer comes from. So I guess the place that I sort of want to start is to tell you a little bit of some background around me. As Lou had said, and in case my shirt can't tell you, I like to break things, particularly systems. Particularly, I like to question power. I have not always been that way. It's sort of a new thing for me. I'm not going to go into extensive detail about my story because that's not the reason why we're here. I don't want to trigger any of you, so I'm just going to sort of give the top lines. I have lived over half of my life in a body that has been consumed by trauma and violence, and that's really hard. My birthday was last week, and I turned 32, and that was a hard number for me, not because I'm getting older, because I love to get old, but because the first time that I experienced trauma, I was 16. And that was also my first experience with any sort of intimacy or any sort of, I guess you could say sexual intercourse, was one that was non-consensual. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't have the words at that moment to know what consent was. I didn't know what sexual assault or rape was. And so I was at a party, and my dad picked me up the next day, and I got into a car, and I just closed that door and was like, close it, done. The next time that I experienced sexual assault and violence was my first week of college, and I was 18. And at that point in time, I knew that what had happened to me was wrong. But once again, he was an athlete on my college campus. It was my first week of school. And I knew that there was power there, and that he was going to be more believed than I would, because he was a scholarship athlete, and I was just like some girl from middle of nowhere in Vermont. No one knew my name. And so once again, I told no one and just continued my life of remaining in silence and doing nothing. And I moved to New York City the day after I graduated from college. And one of the first things that I did in New York, when I sort of discovered what I deem my very white girl feminism, because I was a women's studies minor in college, and I did the vagina monologues and had access to that privilege of that education, and that's how I discovered my feminism. But I helped to organize the New York City Slut Walk in 2011. And when I organized that slut walk, I identified as an ally. I did not identify as a survivor. And I was trying to break apart rape culture. And I was trying to stand up for other survivors, but not identifying as a survivor myself. And through therapy and upon deeper reflection, I have now realized that there was so much shame inside of me. And my history with assault and violence was just so ingrained that it was almost just normal to me, because it had just happened so perpetually in my life. And so then in October of 2017, in early October of 2017, we saw incredible people, I lean away from using gendered language, but women, female-identified folks, literally break out of silence and share their stories. And the Harvey Weinstein news broke October 5th of 2017. And seeing them share their stories did something for me. It showed me that you could share your truth. And I know in the repro movement that I work in, a lot of organizers will say you could speak truth to power. And I know that comes from a lot of POC organizing. And so I was seeing individuals, bless you, I was seeing individuals speak their truth to literal power and share their stories, and they weren't crumbling. Nothing, there was obviously retaliation, but they weren't sort of just going off into the woods. They were standing there, and it was incredible to see. And so I slowly started to tell close friends, some of my family members, about the violence and trauma that I had experienced as a child, as a 16 and 18-year-old. And I started to talk about it in therapy. So this is October 5th. And October 13th, as more news is coming out and more news is coming out, October 13th was a Friday. And I was standing on the corner in a neighborhood called Soho in Manhattan, and I had just finished a work meeting, and I told my boss, I had said, I'm feeling incredibly triggered by the Harvey Weinstein news, and I need to take a day off. I cannot be on the internet. I cannot look at anything. I can't look at Twitter. I need a day. And I work in a very progressive workspace, and my boss was like, yes, I totally understand this. Take what you need. And I went home. I attempted to care for myself and take a nap and do whatever. And my girlfriend, who I was dating at the time, had been away for a week and was coming back into town. And so we met up. We were hanging out, and I was really trying to just stay offline. And we were out, and I wanted to leave the bar early than everyone else that I was with. And so I ordered a Lyft. And I did what I had thought was the safe decision. And what should have been a 15 to 17-minute ride home turned into 79 minutes and 44 seconds of an unsafe ride home. And during that time, a Lyft driver kidnapped me across state lines. And I was sexually assaulted by a driver and two other people. And I had decided that that was when I woke up the next morning, I had zero memory of it, because especially as we know in this room, trauma and the way that it affects your brain is real. And my brain just wrapped itself in this beautiful warm blanket and was like, ooh, girl, some real shit happened last night and you're not going to remember it. And so it took me about 2 days. 2 days to slowly put things together and to decide and to come to the realization through talking to some very close friends that I was going to report. And so within 24 hours, I had reported to the rideshare company Lyft, and they treated me very callously and charged me for the ride. And, those things are sort of inconsequential. But and then I made the very hard decision to report. And I had never reported before. I didn't know what that was. I had seen on television, like what reporting is like. And I think for a lot of us in the room, we see Law and Order SVU or sort of other very dramatized, fictionalized television shows or movies of like what it looks like to go through the reporting process. And so I reported, and I went to a hospital. I had a forensic kit done. It was the hospital who would ask me if I wanted to report to the police. And I think right here is a place where I really want to acknowledge the incredible amount of privileges that I hold. I am a white, cisgendered, queer, straight-passing woman. I am educationally privileged. I have a college degree. I'm documented. English is the only language that I speak. So the way that I interact with the police is incredibly different than many other communities. And so when the ER doctor on duty that morning asked me if I wanted to report to the police, my decision-making process was very different. And so the way that he had framed it was that it was going to be easier to report today on Monday, October 16th, versus waiting 3 hours, 3 days, 3 months, 3 years. Because you can always pull back versus always going forward. And so I involved the police, and I grew up in a very small town in Vermont. Like, my hometown still does not have a traffic light, like very, very rural. And I did not grow up in a space where I was told that cops are safe or that cops do the right thing. But definitely there was it was sort of always there, particularly again, because I grew up in a community, sort of like that, where do the right thing or cops are can sometimes be the answer. And my interaction with the police was fine. It wasn't amazing, it wasn't terrible, but it was fine. And so then through the reporting process, I thought that I was in control. I thought that I maybe had power. I had never done anything like this before. I didn't know. And as I slowly started to realize that in my personal life, again, I work in the reproductive health rights and justice world, and I work with a lot of state-based organizations and a lot of folks to ensure that they have, access to healthcare. And so I do a lot of looking at power, who has power and things like that, but I had never done it in my own life personally. And as I started to work, particularly with my first detective, and I realized that my only job in the world was to heal. My only job was to put myself first and to invest in myself. And I live in New York City, so it was the NYPD. And the New York Police Department stole that from me. There was never a moment where I was able to take a step back and to say, I'm going to invest in myself and to care for myself. Because within weeks, literally less than a month, November 8th was when it all started, I had to beg the NYPD to listen to me, to believe me, and to do their fucking job. And so throughout the next probably 6 months, I slowly started to realize that my first detective was making me do things that were absolutely irrational. Like every single time that I left the state to travel for work, I had to tell her where I was going, why I was leaving the state. And I can't remember your name, but I love the questioning face that you're making. Because at the time I was like, oh no, this is a cop. Like, she knows what she's doing. She's an expert. And it wasn't until one of my friends was like, is your perpetrator having to do this? And I was like, you know what? I don't know. And so then I really started to question power and to question who has power and why don't I have it? Why isn't the NYPD supposedly is victim-centric? And I started to really question, what does that mean? And who is determining that? Sorry, heads up, I'm gonna swear a lot. Because like, let me tell you, it's not fucking survivors. And I realized like, I'm not gonna do this. Like I refuse. And so then it wasn't this, I wasn't clicking a light switch. It wasn't as if I magically all of a sudden, like one day just like stepped into my power and was like, this is it, this feels so comfortable. It was a slow burn. But I realized that if I wanted to do something, if I wanted to make change happen, I had to do it. And so there was a community briefing, particularly because of the Me Too movement and the Me Too breakthrough. And I really want to shout out Monica yesterday because I appreciated that moment, because I think it enrages me when Tarana Burke is erased from the work of Me Too. So I'm going to say the Me Too breakthrough, which I appreciated. And so there was this community meeting, and there were cops and local DAs and local community folks in a neighborhood called Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And I showed up, and they were taking Q&As, and we were asked to write a Q&A or a question on an index card. And this, I don't understand the like power structures and the rankings of police officers. That's not my job. But this dude who was like very high up in the police department stood up, and he had said, like, I work at the NYPD. We're ready with resources. Like, I know that because of the Me Too movement, many survivors are going to come to us and are going to report, and we're ready. And I was just like, fuck that noise. That's not true. And so on my Q&A card, I wrote, I don't believe you. I have an open case with the New York Police Department Special Victims Division. I don't understand how you're saying that you're ready with resources when I can't get my detective to answer my phone call or respond to an email. Like, tell me what you're doing. And this was a moment, it was April 23rd, 2018. I will never forget this day. And it was this moment where I sort of just like threw something into the air, and I didn't know where it was going to land. And the questions were anonymous, and the executive director of this organization who was leading this community space asked my question, and the audience was silent, and then slowly people started to clap, and people started to like howl in support of my question. And I realized that I was most likely not alone. And I realized that if this is happening to me, that there are so many other people out there. And so that was a huge moment for me. And so I realized, like, what can I do? You know, I don't know. There's no answer. I don't know what I could do, but I was like, I'm going to figure something out. And so the next day, and so the big guy at the NYPD, again, his name is irrelevant to me because, like, he doesn't matter. And so I approached him. And I said, so he gave me some like dumb answer. And he said, whoever question this is, I'd love to have a conversation with you. And I approached him and I said, I'm not ready to talk to you right now. I've had a really intense day. Side note, I had been in a rape survivor support group, and that was the last day of my support group. And my support group was like, do you want us to go with you? And I was like, nope, I want to do this alone. But I had just said, I was like, I've had a really intense like sexual assault day. And I was like, I need a break. I'm setting a boundary with you. I said, give me your card and I'll contact you. And so that was a Monday. And so on Wednesday, I called him. And because a lot of folks in the Me Too movement, a lot of the silence breakers had taught me that documentation is everything, I called him and I recorded the phone call. And we spoke on the phone for 45 minutes. And I told him about the callous disregard that I had experienced from my detective within the NYPD. And I filed a complaint against her. And I said, I don't believe you when you say that you are ready and that you are ready for us to come to you and report. And I said, and I don't believe that you are ready with resources, and I want a new detective now. And so within 15 hours, I was assigned to 2 new detectives. And I think the thing that sort of capitalized off of this was that I, unknowing, did not Google my first detective. And had found out via a very short Google search that the city of New York had paid out over $250,000 in settlements because she had primed witnesses for the stand. She had falsely arrested perpetrators because they just looked like perpetrators because of racial profiling, which is bullshit. And I did not understand how she still had a job. And so the thing was that I was like, okay, I'm going to solve multiple problems. Like, this detective is an issue, but then it's like systemic. How does she still have a job? And so I got new detectives. And so now it's April 2018, and my assault happened in October of 2017. And basically, I now start to learn that she had done nothing, that like no one was interviewed, evidence is lost, and I'm starting from scratch. And so this is when I started to realize that if this is happening to me, this is happening to almost everyone. And I started to realize that we as survivors deserve everything. We do not deserve like this small piece over here and this small piece over here. We deserve everything. And what we deserve mostly is we deserve justice. And we deserve justice that we get to define for ourselves. And what justice looks like for me is not going to be the same as justice for you or justice for you. And I started to realize that what I wanted to do was that I wanted to be on the front end of proactive change. And the best way for me to do that was to just like blow the lid off everything. Because in reality, I had nothing to lose. I have a relatively supportive family, but I've got a great fucking support system. Like, my friends in my community are incredible. And I knew that no matter what I did, that they were going to be there for me. And I knew that I had some friends who were lawyers, and so I started to talk to them. And I started to just sort of ask people and to say, like, this is wrong, right? Like, I'm not making this up. I'm not gaslighting myself. And so then it was in August that I started to have conversations with some friends of mine who were human rights lawyers. And I started to ask, like, what can I do? I can hold an individual accountable, but how do I hold this system accountable? Because if I hold an individual accountable, that potentially is only going to affect me. But I don't want just justice for myself. How do I have justice for everyone? And what does that look like? Because I don't want what happened to me to happen to other people. And so then I started to make the decision that I wanted to file a lawsuit against the New York Police Department. And I had never been a plaintiff in a lawsuit. I had no idea what that was going to look like. And in having conversations, I realized that the reason why I really wanted to do this was because going up against the cops or going up against New York City, because New York City is one of the first named plaintiffs in my lawsuit, is because as a white woman and as a white cisgendered straight passing woman, it's a lot fucking easier for me to yell at cops than it is for anyone else. So it was a way, shout out Brittany Packett who taught me this term, it's a way for me to spend my privilege. It's a way for me to spend my privilege to take on the NYPD and to hold them accountable, because ideally this will help victims in the future. Because this lawsuit is not going to affect my criminal case. It's not going to affect me, but it will help victims in the future. That's my hope. So on January 31st of 2019, I'm like, what year are we in? I filed a lawsuit against the New York Police Department. And I'm named in that lawsuit. Personally, it was very important for me to be named in that lawsuit because I think that when you see a name, and this really came out of the Silence Breakers, but when you see a face and a name, and when you hear my story, I am nearly impossible to be ignored. And that was a thing that I did not want the NYPD to do. The New York Police Department is the largest police force in this country, which I'm shocked by because I don't know how it's bigger than LA, but anyway. And I did not want them to ignore me. I wanted cops to see me and to know that, like, you cannot fuck with me. And I filed this lawsuit, and I had no idea what was going to come of it because I was just like, what is a lawsuit? I don't know. We'll just file it. You know, I did some press, and that was sort of it. And I assumed that it was going to take months, years, whatever. But the number one thing that was most important to me is that in my lawsuit, I am not asking for what's called monetary damages. I don't want the NYPD to give me a fucking dime. I'm asking for systemic change, or what's called injunctive relief. I feel like I'm becoming a part-time lawyer. Just kidding. I want them to change everything. So one of the things that I want them to do is there's the system, the New York Police Department is wildly understaffed. So I asked them to hire more detectives. And I don't just want them to hire like detectives over here and to just put bodies in special victims divisions. I want them to hire fully trained. In New York, I don't know what it looks like in other states, but in New York it's called FEDI, which is a trauma-informed interview style process, because I was never interviewed in a trauma-informed way. And I want them to be trauma-informed. I also want them to be treated well. Like, don't we all want to be treated well where we work? Like, I want them to have incredible, like, paid time off, parental leave. It's not just women who have babies. I want them to have incredible, like, I want them to be well cared for. Because wherever you work, if you are well cared for, then you will care for the people that you are serving. And so, yeah, like, cops treated me terribly, but that doesn't mean that I don't want them to have an incredible workspace. And so I think when I went to my lawyers and I was telling them this, they were sort of like, I'm so sorry, you want what? And I was like, yes, we're going to change everything. Like, we're going to break it apart, we're going to light it on fire, we're going to build it up from the ground up. And so slowly, over the past couple of months, I guess now it's been over a year, I've started to see the NYPD like magically change things. Like, they've updated all of their facilities. And like, the NYPD was at one point in time interviewing victims in their staff kitchen. Oh yeah, So imagine if you make the very difficult, agree, that is crazy. If you make the difficult decision to report to your local precinct, and then you're going into a staff kitchen and you're telling your story to a uniformed cop, and then another cop just like waltzes in and is like, no, it's fine. I just like gotta get some Fruit Loops. It'll be fine. Sorry about that, Jack. What? That is bananas. And so it was like 2 weeks before I had filed my lawsuit, and I knew that I was going to file, but because I had been so outspoken and worked with my local city council folks, and I was asked to do a tour of all 5, because there are 5 boroughs in New York City, of all 5 precincts, and I was like, this has got to go. And so in filing the lawsuit, it has been a way to hold the NYPD accountable. It has been a way to make them to realize, because I think sometimes, like, if I ask you if my outfit looks cute and my outfit looks like trash, maybe I can't see, and maybe you can tell me, you look terrible. And to me, I was basically like yelling from the rooftops, NYPD, you look terrible. And they were like, we look great. And so I filed that lawsuit. I do not know where it's going to go. Ideally, there will be more drastic changes. Right now, via their Twitter account yesterday, I found out that they're training more police officers via the FEDI interview style. So it's helpful to see, it's helpful to know that change is happening, but I also know is that, like, I am not doing this alone. I'm having a lot of conversations with other survivors, many of whom are not public, because it's hard. It's hard to share your story. It's hard to be out in the front of things. I am not a parent. It's very easy for me to, when I take time off to do something, to meet with my lawyers, I don't have to think about childcare. I'm single. I don't have to like talk to a partner to be like, hey, this is going to affect our family. Nope. I'm accountable to no one. I literally have a fake plant in my house because I travel a lot. I don't have to water it. Like, I'm accountable to me and myself. But I have an incredible group of survivors that I work with in New York City, and a coalition that I work with and that I hold. And they help to inform a lot of the decisions and the work that I do. And so I filed that lawsuit, and I'm just like, fuck cops, and I keep it moving. And then slowly I was talking to other lawyers, because the other system that I really wanted to start to reform was the rideshare industry. Because when I think about it, I think that it's not only that customers, when you get into a rideshare, particularly myself, but it's also drivers. And I think that oftentimes drivers are left out of this conversation. And so when I reported, I obviously reported to the NYPD. But when you kidnap someone across state lines, it's an automatic federal offense. And my criminal case is currently with the FBI, which is also bananas. But so I knew that I wanted to hold an individual accountable, but I knew that there were people within Lyft and within the rideshare industry as a whole who were making decisions that were affecting all of our lives and that were supposedly saying that trust and safety were their number one concern, when in reality that was not true. And that was not my lived reality. And I think for a lot of us, that's not our lived reality. And I was asking a lot of law firms in New York, and a lot of them said that, you don't have a case, you don't have a case. And so I just sort of let it settle. And then I was like either on Instagram or Twitter, I cannot remember how I found it, but I found it was an article in Vice. And it was, I think it maybe was like 7 or 9 women who had filed a lawsuit anonymously, which means that they had filed as Jane Does, and they were not named in the suit. And the name of the law firm was there. And I just cold called the law firm because I was like, cool, yeah, I talk to lawyers all the time. We'll see what happens. And within, I'm going to say like 45 minutes, this lawyer was like, oh yeah, you've got a suit. Like, let's do this. And I was just like, what? Oh my God. Like my NYPD lawsuit took like months to happen to see like, do I have a case, whatever. And it was less than a month that it took to file a lawsuit against Lyft. And that was a harder. Hello? Oh, yep. It was an easier decision, I think, only because I knew that I wanted to do it, because I knew that they were a monster of a system. And I think that in reality, there's like 8 million plus people who live in New York City, but how many people get into a rideshare on a daily basis, or how many people drive for rideshares? And so that was a thing that I really wanted to be cognizant of. And so in California, I didn't know this, but when you file a lawsuit against a named corporation, you have to put them on notice. So a letter gets sent to Lyft, and my lawyer calls me. I was on vacation, and she says, I'm really sorry. She's like, I'm really sorry that I forgot to tell you this, but I think Lyft is going to hire a private investigator to follow you. She's like, because I opted to be named in that lawsuit as well. I was the first person to be named in a lawsuit against a rideshare company. And she said, because you're going to be named, I think that they will either find you on vacation or they will be waiting for you outside your apartment when you get back to New York. And my lawyer was like, I'm really sorry, this is an oversight. And I was like, my lawyer's name is Megan. I was like, Megan, it's cool, like it's fine. And I hang up the phone and I was like, what does this mean? Like, what does it mean that I am going against a $1 billion corporation? Because NYPD, like, I don't think they have billions of dollars. I don't know. I'm not checking their 990s. And then I call my FBI agent, which is also bananas that I have an FBI agent. His name is Mike. And I was like, hey, Mike. And he's like, you're on vacation. What are you doing? And I was like, nah, there's no such thing as vacation when you're me. It doesn't exist. And I said, so Lyft, I'm filing a lawsuit against Lyft. When I tell someone a secret, I use the term fortress. It means like, this stays between us. And I was like, fortress, I'm filing a lawsuit against Lyft. And they're going to hire a private investigator. And my FBI agent just goes, fuck. He's like, I'm really sorry that I didn't think of this. I should have thought of this. I should have told you this. And he walks me through how I need to change my life, because Lyft is going to start to make it appear as if I'm a terrible person who goes out all the time, who's like drinking too much. Like, they're going to start their case ASAP. So my FBI agent was like, most private investigators are ex-cops. Here's what I would be looking for. Here's what you should do. Here's how you should change how you dress. Here's how much you should change when you drink in public. All of these things. All of these things that we think about all the time because the perfect victim narrative exists. Bullshit, but it exists. So I filed my lawsuit against Lyft on September 17th of 2019. It is unreal. I filed 2 lawsuits last year. Like, that is bananas. And the thing for me, once again, I wanted to be named. I wanted my name and my face attached to that because I did not want the rideshare company Lyft to be able to just... I'm in awe of the women who filed as Jane Does. I want to start there. And they are what really pushed me and inspired me to be able to file my lawsuit. And because I had filed against the NYPD, and again, because of the immense privileges that I hold, I thought and I knew that I could do this. And so then my lawsuit, I got a lot of press because I was named, and Lyft released this like totally ridiculous statement saying that, what happened to Allison was really sad, but, we believe in like the trust and safety of our company and whatever. And for me, I am a couple, I guess now like months out from 2019, and the thing that I continuously think about and that I realize that we as survivors is that like I am no different than any of you. Like literally. I wake up in the morning, I like hate this term of like I put my pants on the same way. But I think for me it's just the idea of like I did not know what justice was going to look like for me. I genuinely did not know. And from the moment that I reported, I thought that it was going to be, like I handed them my Lyft receipt. And I was like, here's his taxi limo commission license number, here's a make and model. Like I handed them everything. And I thought that it was going to be like this because like I watched too much Law and Order SVU. And that was not my lived reality. And so what I started to do was that I started to define justice for myself. And I started to think, what are the avenues of justice? How can I exhaust all of them? And I thought, okay, like I've got a criminal case that's happening. Cool. Do I want to engage in restorative justice or transformative justice? Is that something that I can do? And I thought about that for months. And I thought about, is that something that I want to call on my community to do? Is that something that my perpetrators would potentially want to engage in as well? And I realized like I was not there. I had too much anger. And I consistently, probably on a daily basis, check in with myself. Like, am I ready? Am I ready for that? How am I getting there? Because to my core, you might not believe this, like I'm a prison abolitionist. The state is not the answer. I struggle every single day with how was violence perpetrated against me and I'm not going to perpetrate violence against someone else. It's a struggle that I have. How am I trying to break a system apart and yet I'm also participating in that system? That's really difficult for me. But these are the questions that I think are important that I ask myself every single day and that I ask my community to hold me accountable to have these really difficult and hard questions. And so for me, it's the idea of who is defining justice for me? Because the only person who gets to define justice for me is myself. It is not the NYPD. It is not my lawyers. It is not my FBI agent. It is not a federal prosecutor. It is me and me alone. And that's what I think needs to happen for us, is that power needs to come back into our hands. We are the only people who get to define justice for ourselves. And that definition gets to change any time that you want it to. So you can say today, this is what justice looks like for me. I'm defining it here and now. And then I like the 10 rule, 10 minutes, 10 days, 10 months, 10 years. It can change whenever you want it to. Because we must invest in ourselves in any way, shape, or form, and no matter what that looks like. Because when we invest in ourselves, we will be free. And I don't know what that looks like for any of you. I hope we can all be best friends after this. But I think that's the thing. It gets lost. It gets lost for so many of us. And I really appreciated what Monica was saying about the press and the idea of they're rewriting our stories. No one tells my story except for me. And every single person in my life knows this, especially my lawyers. No one. No one should tell your story. And if you're a direct service provider, I think it's really important to be cognizant of like, what does ethical storytelling look like? If you're telling a story on behalf of someone, how are you bringing them into the room ethically and not using our stories in like a trauma porn type of way? Like Lou taught me this amazing term of survivor adjacent, which I think is I think about it constantly. If we want to live our values and operationalize our values of being survivor centric, that means that survivors are in the center. That means that survivor stories are lifted up. Our lived experiences are at the center, and we are the ones who are driving the narrative in any way, shape, or form. So for me, that means in my lawsuits I'm doing that. For me, it means that I'm like sometimes screaming at my FBI agent, being like, no, 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 no. That's not how this works. And I think it means in our daily lives, with our families, in our workplaces, any point in time, how are you the center of your life? How are you operationalizing and living your values? What does that look like? Because for me, I think, again, it changes. It changes every single day. And I think it's a thing that I don't know how we move forward, particularly, it will be 3 years since the Me Too breakthrough. How do we move forward? And not to remain stagnant, but how do we move forward in a way that survivors are always centered? And I think this work of operationalizing our values, putting survivors first, doing this is exhausting. It is exhausting work. Burnout is real as fuck. So I think the question that I have for folks is what do you need to be sustained and held in this work? What does that look like? What does it look like to be sustained and fulfilled and held in this work? Think about that. When I talk about investing in yourself, I also genuinely mean yes, we can talk about self-care in a capitalistic society of bath bombs and massages, but that's for a lot of rich folks. But what does it mean? And what does that mean on a personal level? What does that mean on a familial level where you work? What does that mean? And the question for me is how can I support you in that? What can I do to help make that happen? Are there policies that we should be putting in place? Are there funders that we should be reaching out to? What can I do? Let me know. I'm easy to find. Obviously this is a different picture. I strive to get that hair again. But find me, email me, DM me, let me know. Because all that I want to do is just fuck shit up and break all the systems. If there's a system that I can help you, find me. Let's do it. Because we're in this work together. We're doing this together. I don't want to lose any of you. I don't, if you're getting burnt out, let's figure something out. Because I think in order to be sustained and fulfilled and to be invested, we have to invest in ourselves and we have to invest in each other. And what does that look like on every single level? And I think the next question that I have for you all is, what if feeling good was a mandate for victory? So if we're defining justice for ourselves, let's also define victory. And then what if feeling good was a mandate for that? So what if it's the idea of let's be victorious? And if we're going to set up what metrics of success are, we've got to ensure that our folks, our community, the people at our tables, that everyone feels good. And that everyone at our and that our tables are not just built by people, that the people at our tables look like us, or specifically look like me. But what communities are we including? Do you have disabled folks at your table? Do you have folks of color at your table? Do you is it not just, as we say in New York, the coastal elites at your table? Who is there? Ensure that every single person is represented. And then if folks at that table are that feels hard, cool. Break that table in half and then make your own. Because I believe in the term nothing about us without us, which also comes from the disability rights movement. But if we are going to do anything, if we are going to actually create and manifest change, we have to be the ones to do that. And we have to do it together. I deeply, deeply believe that we have to do it together. So I think I just want to sort of end with the idea that we are all the same-ish, the same adjacent, because we're not and our stories are different and I don't want to watercolor us all. But I think it's just the idea that I'm so incredibly grateful to be here with you and I'm so incredibly grateful to share this space with you. But it's just the idea that my story, yes, my story is different, but we have all been through some shit. No matter what. And I am not here to play the trauma Olympics. It is never a case of what happened to me is worse and what happened to you is mediocre. It's not. Trauma and harm is not a hierarchy. There is no comparison to be made. The worst day of your life is the worst day of your life. We are all healing from something. And that is so vital for us. It's so vital for us to remember that everyone is going through some shit. We are all struggling with something. And we've got to remember that. And we've all got to hold space for that. Sometimes we're just having a bad day. But what are we doing collectively to remember that we can do this together? I just want to end there. Does anyone have any? Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, reflections? I also love feedback, if that wasn't great. I just want to open it up. Yeah, go ahead.
I also had
Wait, hold on. I want to come with the microphone because for accessibility reasons.
I have a loud voice, but I'll go in here. First of all, thank you for that. That was incredible. And I see how you and Lou have connected because you're both national treasures. Thank you so much for sharing. I just want to say that I also had an issue with the LAPD where they compromised my I'm so tired. What am I thinking of? My confidentiality by leaking my report directly to my aggressor. So I never pursued that because I never found an actual avenue for that, but that's actually a very common, sad story that happens with the LAPD, and it put me in a lot of danger directly, more so than I had ever been. I would love to talk to you more about how you went forward with taking on that kind of a system, because I consider myself a system breaker also, but I don't think people realize the extent of what a mess you get into when you go after, whether it's an individual or a corporation or whoever it is who you're seeking justice from, the calamity that occurs that falls on one person, and what it takes to get the support system we need to get through that. So I really loved just everything you said, and I feel very inspired and reignited over that issue that I've been putting away. So anyway.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so sorry that happened. Yeah, I think you're totally right. And I know one of the things, I have this like great Google drive that I'll send you. And then I send, because a lot of survivors, particularly in New York, but will reach out to me and say like, I want to, I tried to report to the NYPD and I couldn't, or I tried to do this and I couldn't. And I sort of have like a reporting 101 doc. And one of the things that I have in there is a FOIL request, a Freedom of Information. In New York, it's a law. I think maybe nationally it's an act. But I know like I tried to get my my police report and everything and my case file, and I was just filing Freedom of Information requests constantly. And then I couldn't because like my case is open and blah blah blah. Cops are terrible. But I will share that with you. And also like I will I'm best friends with someone in the FBI, and I'll be like, yo, Mike, you know someone in LAPD? And I think for me, it's just the idea of like my network right now is ridiculous in the sense of like the amount of people that I know in law enforcement / lawyers, and anything that I can do to help another survivor. And this is what I'm saying, like lean on me. Again, I'm very easy to find. One, I'm here all day. Two, like I'm on Twitter, DM me on Instagram. My Gmail is literally in my Twitter account. And connect with me. And like, if you either personally or you know someone else, like my hand is raised, I am here, and I'm more than happy to be helpful in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, I would love that. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Question? Yeah. I love this color.
Thank you. Well, first I want to say I think you're a total badass, and I'm honored to be in the room with you. My question, I'm not exactly sure how to word it, but as you were talking about being told that you were being followed and all the changes to your life you were going to have to make, just in the short time that we've kind of got a glimpse at you being you, how did you reconcile that? How did you, manage what you were being asked to do and the changes you were being asked to make? Because it seems as though, they were trying to keep you from being painted as a certain type of victim, which we know is very common.
Mm-hmm. Also great manicure. Yeah, that's such a great question. So, sorry, I love affirmations, in case you can't tell. That's such a great question, and it's so timely because it's something that I'm also personally struggling with now. I will answer, but I sort of have like a longer story longer. So I'm currently, in a couple weeks, I will most likely have to get on the stand in a federal grand jury, which is one of the reasons why I love this haircut. But I was told by some folks in the federal government that this haircut is too intense for a jury, and it's too distracting. And so that's why I look like this, because I need to look plain. And so there are, I don't know you, but I'm just like, yep, that face. And so that's why, like, there are some folks who, at Echo who were like asking me for headshots, and I was like, I haven't updated my headshots because I just don't, I'm like, this is the person that I always want to be. Like, I want to have my head shaved constantly, but I have to, this haircut is great, but, so for me, it was like, I really struggled because it's very similar to like working within the criminal legal system. I will personally never call it the criminal justice system because I don't believe that, for me, justice is not served within that system. So for me, it's the idea of the perfect victim narrative exists and I fucking hate it. But yet here I am playing a part to it. And it's one of the reasons why, like, I speak about it constantly. And I know every single time that, like, my federal prosecutor or my FBI agent says something, in that room, I will always push back. And I will always say, why? Like, tell me why. I talk with my hands, obviously, a ton. Or I, like, move around. And they'll say, like, we have to get you. I also, when someone asks me a question, I will answer it the longest way. And the prosecutor's like, answer the question that you were asked. And I'm like, yeah, so no. And so for me, it's just the idea of, I think that I want to bring everything into the room. And so I will bring my full self into the room, but then once I leave that room, like, you bet your fucking ass, I'm going to talk about it. And I'm going to talk about it and I'm going to name it. Because the thing is that if you, in my opinion, if you don't name a problem, it does not exist. And so I'm going to name all of the problems that I am experiencing within the legal system, because if I name them, one, other survivors know that they exist. Two, maybe the legal system will get their shit together and change it. And three, then for me, it's the idea of, I'm not imagining it. I'm not being gaslit. And I can maybe do something about it. And so I'm going to always speak my truth, because guess what? The truth is not fucking flexible. And my story, in our stories and our lived experiences, it is not flexible. And there are people in our lives who will try to tell us differently or make us feel differently, but it is not. It is not. Your truth, your story, your life is not flexible. Always, always, always remember that. And so for me, it was during the summer when I got that call, and I have this like amazing black bodysuit that like dips in the back, and I wear it with denim shorts, and like, ooh, I just love it. Nope, couldn't wear it. Couldn't wear it in public because it would make me look like too much of a slut or, anything like that. And so I had to, and I was just devastated because I love that bodysuit so much. And so for me, it was just the idea of like, okay, I guess, and then there were parameters of like, if you're out with your friends and if they're acting a little bit too wild, you've got to leave immediately. And so it was just the idea of like, I was starting to change my life. And it affected, it's affected some of my friends' lives as well. Cause like I'm being followed, I'm being photographed. And it's hard. But the thing for me is that like, it riles me up even more. Cause I'm like, oh, you guys want to go? Let's go. So yeah. Any other questions? I was like, see, that's a great example. Long story longer.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Molly Maeve. I just want to let you know how inspiring and what a powerful speaker I think you are. I've been frustrated with the NYPD since I was 12 when they asked my best friend and I what we were wearing when she was gang raped. And, 30 years later, I'm still trying to get them to hold a predator accountable, and they're giving him anger management. So I look forward to speaking with you because I certainly didn't have a voice at 12. And when I went back to them in 2016, I could feel my voice still faltering because of how big the justice system is there. And so I think what you're saying is right, that we really need to remember how much power we have and to use our voices and to use our collective voices. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm so sorry that happened. And yes, we will connect and fuck shit up together.
Hello, hi. My name is Laura Tall, and I was blacklisted by SAG-AFTRA, ABC, and Disney. So I know what it means to fight And after hearing what you said, it makes me wonder if they've been having someone follow me around. Because some people won't talk to me, or they'll start talking to me and be my friend. Next thing you know, they're not talking to me, especially if they're actors. And not having actors in my life means I can't do what I love. The cops have shown up at my doorstep 4 times on checkups for me to see if I'm okay. The first time they knocked on my door, they told me, one of the guys said, "You're crazy, you're not a lawyer." My bar number is 207. I looked at the uniform cop and they said, "My bar number is 207690. I'm a resigned lawyer in the state of California." "What do you mean I'm not a lawyer?" Because SAG-AFTRA had the cops put me on a 3-day hold saying, "She said she's a lawyer." I am a lawyer. I'm a lawyer with a theater degree. But apparently because Patrick Dempsey and Eric Day and certain actors in this town think lawyers look like hot models, I can't be one. And I also can't be an actor, but I'm both. So I've been fighting my own system because I'd like to shake ABC and Disney up, and SAG-AFTRA, because SAG-AFTRA shouldn't be enabling people. And they have been, signing NDAs, keeping everything quiet. I had someone contact me about a guy who was my teacher, and she said that she was actually filing charges, but she had to keep quiet about it, didn't tell anybody. I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And I realized, oh, she's negotiating with the union, and they have an NDA.
I think that, thank you so much for sharing. I think that's really what can happen so often is that we terrify people. And I think it's because when we, sort of either step into our power or when we decide that I think it's that we've always had enough. Like when it started, we were having enough, but we just didn't know. It can take a little bit to sort of realize it. Or again, I think that so often, particularly if you are someone who has experienced trauma for a very long time, and then it's just like, am I imagining this? And I was just saying this to, some of the silence breakers last night or yesterday afternoon, but, particularly like sexual harassment at work, where it's the idea of like, if you think that like, let's say like, your boss placed his hand on the knee, but you know that it was higher or anything like that, and excuse me, and then it's just like, am I imagining this? Is this really what happened? And then when they're like, and so I think it's just the idea of there is yeah, right, and you know that, and you know it, and then I think that when there is a moment when you say to yourself and to the broader world and to like your broader community, when you say like, I know that this happened, and you will not try to talk me out of it, or you will not take this away, and when you reclaim that, and when there is that shift in balance and that shift in power, you are terrifying to them. And that is the thing, is that right now I am terrifying to the NYPD. I am terrifying to Lyft. And guess what? I think it's amazing. And right now I know that like they cannot do anything to me. Like, yes, they can like have me followed, and like that originally was very scary to me. But right now it's just the idea of, again, my truth is not flexible. I know what happened to me, and I'm going to do everything to hold you accountable. And that is so scary to them. And because vulnerability begets vulnerability. And when I am vulnerable and when I share my story, potentially it has the opportunity to open the floodgates and for other people to do the same. And that's in reality what I hope happens. I hope that maybe not with the NYPD and maybe not with Lyft, but maybe with other people, whether it's, if it's in your family, in your community, in your school, wherever it is, that ideally if I can help and support you to hold something or someone accountable, I want to do that. And I want to do it, and I want to like be so far back. Because I'm not, as we know, when a survivor or someone shares their story, we have nothing to gain and everything to lose. And we are not opportunists. And I think I'm coming to you. And I think that that's what's really important, is that like people are terrified of us because of that reason. And so I think like I see how strong you are, I see how powerful you are, I see you stepping into your power, and that's why people are terrified of you. I'm not terrified of you. I think you're great.
Okay, rock star. Really inspiring. And one of the things I wanted to say is that I love the break the system piece, because people will say, the criminal system is broken, but it's not broken. It's actually perfectly designed to get the results that it's getting. And so it has to be broken apart. We have to see it as that it's a fine oiled machine that wants these results and is good at getting these results. And so it has to be broken apart. So I really appreciate that perspective.
Thank you. That's actually a great point, that it is designed to get exactly the results that it's getting. Someone over here. Yeah. I love that I'm getting my steps in.
Hi. So I am a survivor, and I'm also I work with county mental health, children's mental health specifically, and our clinic is a specialty clinic that works with children's victims of sexual abuse, domestic violence, and so forth. So next week is my exit interview with my yeah my executive director. And I want to thank you because you empowered the reason why I'm leaving. The system is bananas, how you were saying. It doesn't hold my values as a clinician, as a survivor, as someone that wants to heal our community. It's so broken. It's actually not broken, just like how she said it. And I want to break the systems. I've been called oppositional. I've been called ruthless because I do speak my truth. And I want to thank you that because you validated the reason why I'm leaving. And I'm going to speak my truth. On Monday, when I have my exit interview, I'm going to speak it. And I don't give a fuck anymore.
Oh my God, shout out to you. We have like 5 more minutes-ish. Anyone else? Oh, yep.
Hi. I just wanted to say 2 things. One, the idea of breaking the system and from start to finish, from not being mentally prepared to battle people who are detached from the thing and just, like you said, stepping into your power like overnight. That takes a lot of strength. But also like the little things like with the Harvey Weinstein, it's like they broke the the non-disclosure agreements. Like those little things really matter. Like even when you're dealing with sexual harassment in the workplace, they get to do tax write-offs, and then as the victim, you have to claim that money. So just the little tiny things that nobody is thinking about is what you're bringing to light within that system, but every system has to be broken. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's 100% right. And I think it's the idea of like and like shout out to all of my friends when I call myself like a baby feminist when I, like 2010, 2011, who really like taught me. And I think it was like a lot of Black women who really taught me like it is systemic. Like you've got to think about this as a system. And that's what's really helped me. And I think it's the idea like we work within systems every single day in our workplace, in our families. It's like everything. And how are we doing that? And I think also you're totally right that it takes a support system. And I'm incredibly grateful. Like shout out to my best friend Morgan, who has always been like my person and who was there with me the day that I reported and who like I'm sure I have 900 text messages from her telling me how amazing I am. But it's really important to have those people. And I think also like asking for what you need is not being needy is the other thing that took me a long time to realize. Asking for what you need is not being needy. Asking for help is not a bad thing. I think so often we are told that it is, particularly as women, and it's not. And I think that comes in terms of like setting a boundary, that comes in terms of all of those things, but like asking for what you need and saying like, hey, like I really need you to show up for me today, or like I really need some space, or like I just need a friend, or like I'm gonna do something. Like for me, when I made the decision to file a lawsuit against Lyft, I texted Morgan and I just said, do you have 5 minutes? And I just said to her like, I don't want feedback, I don't want your opinion. I'm filing a lawsuit against Lyft in the next 2 months and this is what's gonna happen. And then she was like, this is amazing, blah, 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 whatever. And I was like, this is like, I've made this decision. Morgan's like, she's straight, but she's like my life partner. And that's the thing, is that I said that. And I was like, I need this from you. I was like, all that I need is your support. So yeah. I think we have time for maybe just like one more question. Oh my God, am I running like a dove? Like, what am I doing?
I did that on purpose to make you. You're amazing, so inspiring. My name is Marissa. I work with Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. Lanisha here is our chapter coordinator for the LA chapter. I'm blown away you filing the lawsuit. I'm also a lawyer, so I know that impact litigation is so important, and it takes brave people to put their name on those lawsuits. And I think what's resonating with me right now, or what's giving me sort of pause, is that it's awful that we as a country don't address things until they get to the criminal justice or the criminal legal system, right? A lot of my work is trying to get governments and systems to really look at investments in prevention. I mean, we would have to heal toxic masculinity for these things to not happen. But it's about investing in community-based mental health, behavioral health services. And we often work with survivors who say, I just don't want what happened to me to happen to someone else. And it's heartbreaking to have a mom say, if the person who killed my loved one had just had addiction help or behavioral health services, my child would still be alive. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I really hope that all of the hard work that you're doing really trickles down and upstream to all of the other systems that also need breaking, transformation, because what happened to you and what happens to so many survivors is really just a symptom of like an epic failure of all of the systems that came before them, right? It wasn't just one break, as I'm sure you know. So anyway, that's my hope, that you just, go viral even more and just impact way beyond what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. You all are literally amazing. Thank you for spending your morning with me. And let's hang out and be best friends. And that's it. I'm going to hand this over to Lou.
And have a round of applause for Allison, please.